The world of Teyvat has many places to explore, but also many things that you might perhaps miss, or even parts of the map you're not meant to see. This is something I've often enjoyed doing during those quiet moments of downtime in the game. Looking out over the horizon, thinking about what that one blob mountain could end up looking like in the future. All these areas Paimon doesn't want you to know about. Seeing Teyvat from the Jade Chamber and that one damn Liyue house that is still standing there all on its own. I'm telling you, this house could survive the cataclysm. So today, I've made it my mission to go around Teyvat's borders to see what interesting things we might find. This isn't including water because, well, there's nothing to see over at the Dark Sea. It's just the mainland borders we'll be going along, and we'll be starting at the tip of Stormbearer Mountains, right next to the Paimon barrier. Oh, I'm sorry, am I boring you? Starting next to the Anemo hypostasis, I immediately noticed some interesting ruins which I hadn't taken into consideration before, but looking at their placement, you can kind of see how at some point a long time ago, there might have been a building surrounding this shrine, given its placement. Oh, and that's the first Paimon of this trip. Regardless, I moved on toward the very tip of the mountains. There wasn't too much of note here, other than those slimes and a whopper flower. Many of you might already know whopper flowers are generally found along shores. And something else I have often wondered about all the bodies of water in Mondstadt is how much of it is naturally formed and how much is Klee's doing. But given that there is a little hidden stone platform at the bottom of this waterfall that looks like the rest of Mondstadt's ruins, it probably means the waterfall is not Klee's doing. The cliff above the waterfall gives us a pretty good view of the likely area for Dortmund Port. The part on the left, just hidden from view, is where the water would have connected to Cider Lake before— shh, don't speak her name. Carrying along the cliff, as we'll find for a lot of Teyvat's map edges, there wasn't a whole lot, until we got closer to Stormbearer Point and a lot more ruins started appearing. There was quite a bit still remaining on this one ruin, which you can tell would have been a small building. But another interesting thing about this little forest is the lone Fatui mage strolling back and forth along this little naturally formed path. Hoyo doesn't just place Fatui anywhere. There's always a reason for why they are where they are. But for this Fatui, there actually isn't a clear answer. Of course, at the tip of the Stormwatch Tower, we have Vind over here, the Stormwatcher who has been chased out of the tower by Hillachels that have taken up residence. Palad obviously had to show up to ruin my mood. There are a few outcrops along the cliffs here, but they are completely empty. Better just for viewing from a distance. What a view though. Carrying on, we headed past Thousand Winds Temple and the Cryo Registfine, and now, this is gonna be funny. I never realized in my entire 4 years of playing this game that there is an actual entrance to the arena. Along the shoal there wasn't too much going on, just Hillachels, slimes, the usual. A few wrecked boats and carts too, which actually could have an explanation. As the kayak quest leads to a ruin right here filled with treasure hoarders, the likely explanation for the wrecked goods is that they were transporting stuff to their hideout. Further along is the Dada Upag Gorge, a gigantic cookpot, and even a few tiny beaches along the shoreline, but nothing on them. So here's the thing, Genshin does do geography pretty well a lot of the time. For example, in Mondstadt, you don't find birch trees just anywhere. They're a lot more common in the areas that will probably be colder, so more elevated, and this also means they appear more commonly the closer you get to Dragonspine. The top of Cape Oath has the portal to Musgrave, but that's about it. Then we get to the Electro Hypostasis, and guess what? There are Fatui, and there is indeed a reason for them being here since 1.0, but it wasn't until Inazuma came out that we got more answers. This portion of Mondstadt is also pretty empty, as it was added as a small stretch of connecting land to Dragonspine when it was released. As you can see, it looks a lot like out of bounds land, like it's not supposed to be accessed. What is really cool is seeing how the land changes as you head on into the next region or location. The weather and colour changes once we hit the border, and a lot of pine trees and more birch trees. Something else of note is the amount of chopped trees you see around here. Back at the Adventurers Guild camp at the base of the mountain, they have a big supply of logs, so presumably they've been going around the entire forest felling them for supplies. The change in landscape is pretty cool too, because just hear me out here. All of Mondstadt's landscape is pretty sharp, right? But in Dragonspine, it's a lot more angular, pointing up, and even resembles the star silver ore found here. There's a few tiny docks scattered along the shoreline, at least what remains of them, as well as a lot of wrecked boats. How or why people are building docks out here though, when they are not surviving that shit cold. Further along there's a little cove with even more wrecked boats, and some frozen boars, until we end up at a part of Durin, though I'm not quite sure what part of him it is, considering the other side of Dragonspine contains his head and ribs. Guys, I think I found the Dragonspine. He must have been huge to span the entirety of the mountain. Then there's another tiny dock with a Mitterchel from the nearby Hillachel camp. But the way it's built isn't crude enough to have been done by Hillachels, and there's even some fences leading along this path. So at some point along the coast of Dragonspine, people must have settled. We've also got along here the only place aside from the cryohypostasis where ruin guards are still in operation. When you think about it, it makes sense, since it's so cut off from the rest of the mountain, and a lot probably wash up on shore too. An ancient road starts to form for just a bit as we reach ruins from the times of Salvindagnir. The confusing thing about this is of course why it's out here in a super inaccessible part of Dragonspine. The road continues on until it just leads us to water, with tipped over pillars engulfed in the water too. Could there be more that has eroded and sunk underwater perhaps? There's also a lone lit campfire right on the edge of the border. The Liyue stretches next, and as with entering Dragonspine, you can see the point where we switch region from Mondstadt and Dragonspine to Liyue as the weather changes, but a few remnants of Dragonspine remain, such as another ruin guard likely from Dragonspine, and someone that decided a great place to settle their snail house would be right next to it, as well as a bunch of old Liyue ruins. And as with everything, you find some Fatui, there's always a reason. Most likely to investigate the nearby Yaksha ruins. The landscape of the shoal itself is very striking. Essentially, they're basalt columns formed when lava or magma cools. It still retains much of that heat, so to cool down further, the basalt forms cracks to form these shapes. Basically, this implies that, likely even before the arrival of the primordial one perhaps, there used to be volcanic activity in the region. Dead ruin guards dot the beach near the Hillachel camp, as much seems to have been washed ashore too. As we head to the other side of the estuary, there is another snail house intact with an inhabitant inside who surprisingly has quite a bit of lore for an NPC you barely talk to. Granny Chew is mentioned in multiple texts. First, Rold's diary, which mentions the Green Conch Lodge with legends tied to it. Some say it's the home of an adeptus, others the home of a family that have lived in it for generations. She's also met Alice, who regales us with another great tale of how her family supposedly sailed here on the shell, and that she now spends her time rescuing shipwrecked people. Once again, there are Fatui mages, and basically, if you're near a ruin, there's gonna be Fatui. There are quite a few in this area, as well as treasure hoarders. You know what they say, where there's treasure, there's hoarders? This little section has a huge amount of hydro slimes roaming about, and a little abyss mage gathering next to a few old stone columns. Also interesting because there's nothing else around this area to suggest there used to be an ancient building of any kind other than here. The rest of the coastline toward Liyue Harbour is pretty empty, as it transforms to cliffs that also don't really have anything going on. There's not a whole lot to talk about with the harbour that we don't all probably already know, though this lighthouse has always confused me because a wooden bridge is not going to cut it. What happens when the tide rises? The southern part of Liyue Harbour becomes very liminal spacey. You'll see what I mean in a second. First though, behind this house is a somewhat hidden path heading up the mountain. The path itself just stops, but do you want to know where it leads? Right to an opening of the Golden House. This, in my opinion as an inspector, is a huge security flaw. Look at this, it's so easily climbable too. I can kind of see the design of the Golden House from both angles. Technically, building within an opening that's surrounded by cliffs can be good. It means there's only one entrance, but considering how accessible these cliffs are, what's to stop someone from ambushing or taking out the guards from up top? Besides, we already know how well things went for them the last time someone tried to rob the place. Anyway, going along the shoreline, we can see the remains of an old part of Liyue, a few buried houses and platforms, though I do kind of wish Hoyo had added a bit more to the harbour on this side, as it starts getting really empty, and feels extra weird when you look over to the rest of the harbour. And the weirdest part is, as we keep going, it becomes really liminal. There's just nothing along here. Yet they decided to add a fishing spot here, and it ends up feeling really out of place because you don't feel like you're meant to be on this part of the map. There are little crevices that you can see lead to the other side of the shore, and you can even reach it. It's certainly a weird vibe. The rest of the border is next to the Golden House, and reaching the top of these cliffs is just as weird. It's entirely devoid of life, and the grass even decides it doesn't want to be there. There's the Black Cliff Forge, and this this entire cliff range is just very much a you're not meant to be here moment, but you can even go quite far in. Passing above Shenhe's village, we then arrive at the notorious Lone Liyue house. But did you know, you can actually get quite close up to it if you look at the Paimon barrier, right up close to this region's placeholder. If we go up these cliffs, we get an even better view of the whole area. A lonely adventurer's tent stands on the other side of the mountain, with another unfinished road and a single dendro slime. Dendro slimes can be found in a few spots along the border of Sumeru and Liyue. The edges of the chasm are really empty, which does make you wonder why they even made this portion accessible when there's nothing to do. Then we finally start seeing the yellow slowly turn to a bright green, and we're in Sumeru. There isn't really much to see along this part of Sumeru either. The entire connecting land of Liyue and Sumeru is very empty. We pass an Eremite palace, and there is quite a cute interaction between an Eremite and tiger, if a bit dangerous. Though the Eremites seem to be friendly with this entire pack, we do start to see some changes as we go along, where even in relatively empty areas, there is more life, like a herd of beasts up in the mountains. You can even see quite a bit of the inaccessible part of the Liyue and Sumeru coastline. There's even a group of dancing Eremites too. Then of course, the unfilled path extending far into the out of bounds area. Nearing Port Ormos, the land once again becomes eerily empty, though there are a few puzzles and enemies, and a little R&R being scared by some hillachels. The rest of the coast past Port Ormos didn't have much to offer, save for another small dock by the wayside. There is that giant portion of coastline, as you can see, but Paimon forces us back inland again, and I had never actually realised just how many waterfalls there are leading into Apalm Woods. There's another path leading to a shrine and ranger's tent, which, okay, see, this is my problem with Paimon's border. You'll have areas that are accessible, but they'll be put so close to the Paimon border, your screen is just red the entire time. Then there's a really hard to reach Eremite palace, nestled in the corner of the map, on the edge of the desert. Oh, hold on, Mavuika is craving omelette. Right on top of this mountain are those two big Mitachels duking it out, and the grass slowly but surely transforms into the vast desert of Sumeru. Now, instead of heading along the road, we'll be going along here, and this way does seem to have remnants of a pathway. The desert by far has the weirdest vibe to it along the edges. I suppose because deserts are already pretty empty, so the added barrenness increases that sense of loneliness. Especially when you come across an abandoned little camp, of hillachel make by the looks of it. As we continue along, we also come across a Fatui tent, and that small Eremite settlement from the Archon quest. Cliffs block the player's sightline for most of this section of the desert, so if you're exploring from here, you're not going to think much of the other side, but we can just about walk along the upper perimeter as we arrive at the valley with the imposing ruin guard. Again though, if you do decide to attempt to reach the top of these cliffs, there is actual stuff going on. Like here, there's a cute little encampment of Eremites chilling with their animal friends. This one's even petting a cat. Even further down, there's some treasure hoarders, and see, this is where I love the world building in Teyvat, and you can definitely see how much it's improved with each region, because treasure hoarders aren't super common in Sumeru, or Natlan for that matter, but of course you're going to see them where there are opportunities to be made, like the Valley of Dari, filled with Conrian remnants. This treasure hoarder has somehow managed to befriend a vulture, and this right hand side is interesting because they put air currents there, so they clearly want this bit to be accessible, but there's nothing much going on. Paimon, that's not even a barrier. How is that fair? It is also possible to see what's behind the giant robot, and where its other parts ended up. If we go right to the top, this is the back of it, and wow, this view actually makes it look a lot more impressive. You can see its whole body. Look at those tiny little legs. Then on the other side, the valley actually doesn't lead to anywhere, as it's blocked off by more rocks, but it's surprisingly close to the coastline. From the top of this cliff is an awe-inspiring view of Natlan, and as you can see, between us and Natlan is more of that vast expanse of inaccessible desert, as well as a little mushroom meeting. On the last little bit of cliff is another interesting piece of world building, what looks to be an abandoned hillachel camp. Having camped here, they probably thought the ruin guard was inactive, but as you can see, it definitely was not. Also one of the rare instances of dead hillachels being found in the world. There is also a rather well hidden Eremite camp underneath that I would imagine a lot of people didn't even realize was here, but by far the eeriest the desert gets, in my opinion, is along this border, especially at night. It was even eerier when Natlan wasn't yet here. It often left me wondering just what was beyond the nothingness of the sand. Imagine walking in the middle of an empty part of the desert desert and seeing that in the distance. There's even an actual mirage. Along the final stretch, more and more Fatui start appearing because, well, the Fatui be Fatui-ing. Arriving at the border between Sumeru and Natlan yields the exact same issues as with Liyue and Sumeru's borders. Most of the connecting land ends up really empty, and this time they didn't even make the land connection a part of the journey. You know how with Sumeru, the canonical way would be to head through the chasm tunnel, and then you arrive on the other side and are greeted with this stunning view of the statue in Gandharvaville? Well, there's no such thing for Natlan, which I find disappointing because as much as Natlan is disconnected lore-wise from the rest of Teyvat, but they're still a part of the world as a whole, and it just makes the region feel disjointed. That magical feeling of making a journey from one region to the other just doesn't exist. Instead, it's just, yeah, use this waypoint and you're there. But anyway, along this part of the border, it's much easier to see the rest of the desert, and that technically speaking, Natlan is surrounded by water. The Samudra coast connects all the way up to the ocean on this side. Once I had officially arrived in Natlan, I headed around here. These cliffs are here just as the backdrop. There's literally nothing to do or see, bar a few animals, until you reach the Children of Echoes and head past that settlement, the exploration officially starts. And the region starts to come to life a bit more. A lone Tepetlosaur is sat outside a tent, perhaps a friend of the nearby Sauroform warriors. It's not long either before we come across our first dragon skeleton of the region, which is being used as shelter for the warriors. And it looks like they're raising saurians. They've even got a pet dog. I do wonder though, considering how far out of the way it is, whether them bringing up young saurians has more motivation behind it. We do know, after all, that some aren't averse to associating with treasure hoarders, and there are a few signs of destroyed carts. Then up further we've got a little slide that a baby Tepetlosaur is trying to use, while being encouraged by an adult at the bottom. This one seems to be in deep conversation with an alpaca. From here we can also see where the river meets the ocean from this side, which as you can see is also very empty. Until we find another skeleton that has even more cute interactions like this. Nearing the people of the springs, I come across this little island, where a Kaholasaur is giving what looks to be swimming lessons to younger ones. Wait, did it just squirt water out of its stomach? In a small outcrop stands an NPC, whose story you might have missed. Yeah, he gets eaten by an avatar of lava. We come across a tiny dock, this location being where you can also go fishing with little one, but there's no way that's the only dock in all of Natlan, right? No, this doesn't count. An empty Fatui camp, which I think is related to the Archon quest. The closer we get to the tribe, the more Kaholasaurs start to show up. This is when I got spotted by a whelp, who proceeded to be too cute to handle. I said hi to the local legend tortoise and carried on my way. I did have a look around the outer islands too, and like, okay, look at this map. Why, Hoyo? Why did you put the border here? And even then, these outer islands are barren as it is. Passing through the people of the springs and around the other islands, I did come across more animals, like these capybara going for a swim. But what I was most curious about was this one. This island was added alongside the volcano region, so was part of the connecting border between the two. And it is completely empty. Not a single animal, plant, or chest. And once I had arrived, there wasn't even one of those spirit things for me to use. Good thing I have a motorbike that can float on water. You can see on the map, before we even head there, how empty this area connecting the regions is. But let's go take a look. The moment we reach the border and the zone changes, it takes on a slightly red hue, with ash from the nearby volcano floating around us. It took me a good while before I came across any living creature. I did head a bit inland because I had never really looked around this area before, and there was actually quite a diverse range of animals there. Off in the distance, I spotted a group of hillagers chasing some boars around. In this little bay was some Kaholasaur surrounding a pool of fish. Seems they couldn't decide who would get first pickings. I ran into a Tatankasaur, mistaking a pheasant for food. Are saurians carnivores? No, they're not, right? They eat grain. And next thing I knew, I stumbled across even more hillachels bullying the local wildlife. The volcano coastline had a surprising amount of things going on too, like this group of hillachels that had holed themselves up in a cavern and kidnapped a poor little Tatankasaur. I have no idea where they went. Anyway, ancient dragon ruins litter the coast. Meanwhile, someone has set up shop in the middle of nowhere, right next to said ancient ruins, and of all things, selling music and trying to scam people out of it. The fishing spot here is really nice though. I love the small details details in this region, like how it's windier than the rest of Natlan because volcano. They seem to be having a fight over there. Well, this region's warriors certainly need the training. Strongest tribe, by the way. See, even an area you would expect to find nothing, there's something. And also makes sense, since these species of tortoises live in phlogiston-rich areas, as are the beetles. The crystal beetles are even rather friendly, and since they have the ability to spot special ores, miners from the Children of Echoes befriend them for help. This little Tatankasaur has claimed this boat for itself, which we can gather actually belongs to the Fatui further down. Considering the large presence of Fatui in this section of the map, this is likely where they would be arriving from, and it keeps them away from the eyes of the Collective of Plenty that are on the other side of the island. Another local legend, this time a duo, is located along here, which, as you can see, this penguin and goat model is much larger than usual. As I continued, these Kaholosaurs seem to have claimed this small platform dock thing as their own, while just behind them, these birds seem to be cheering on a fight between two Tatankasaurs. My bet is on the right one. As soon as I spotted an ancient flying dragon in the distance, the volcano erupted, which certainly isn't ominous. For a moment, I thought this long-necked rhino was stuck, but as I got closer, I looked underwater and realized there were geysers underneath it. It's just enjoying a little steamy bath, and even looks like it's been fed. Of note, as we continue the journey, is this air balloon crash site where these warriors seem to have landed, right on top of a hilichurl camp, and are currently locked in combat with them. We can even see a few dead hilichurls along this path. You know, something I've noticed about the coast of Teyvat in general, minus Inazuma, is that there are no crashed ships. Boats, yes, but no ships. Nearing the border to the Nightwind region, I found a capybara and penguin chilling in a floaty, and even more penguins swimming around nearby. Hidden from view beneath the cliffs is a group of treasure hoarders, associated with a small quest with the little one, where you need to rescue these saurians from traffickers. There's also even more destroyed saurian carts down the beach. This area of the map along the coastline has its own biome. It's meant to resemble a mangrove swamp from real life, but definitely a lot more almost alien-like in Natlan. The Kukasaurs are curious because being based on flamingos, it makes sense that they live around the coast. But Kukasaurs also like to make their homes up high too. Crossing the bridge toward the Flower Feather clan, I noticed a cute little Easter egg. This couple have formed a heart around themselves with rock. This camp also has an associated quest, but what is really interesting, as far as I'm aware, is this is the only place in Natlan where you can come across a sumpter beast. Heading around the small islands of Natlan didn't reveal much, except for just how diverse the wildlife here of all places is. It's the same with the ancient mountain, right? Years of abandonment has allowed all kinds to thrive. Here, each type of saurian shares a home together. Whenever I see a destroyed saurian cart, I always try to picture what could have happened. Perhaps even this nearby Tapetlosaur is the one that managed to escape. Nearby is a fun mini game you can play with some sealies. How is Lumin moving the dragon though? From here, you can see the valley that leads out into the sea, and as we steer our course over to this side, it is noticeably empty. Further up, a few watchtowers can be found in this upper region, which to me implies this entire area is a sort of wildlife protected zone, considering we can find little else but saurians and animals. Okay, except for these treasure hoarders. Look at how empty it all is. At the very least, the top of this cliff has something going on. Seems to be where mining operations take place. Again though, what is this? Looping back around, we are once again greeted by a vast sea of sand. This time though, we're headed through the girdle of sands. There is a valley not too far off the entrance to Natlan, occupied by eremites. This one is trying to fight off flying serpents. This one jump scared me, and this one is poking a ruin guard. Instead of heading in the correct direction along the road, I'm gonna be going around the back. That's the Natlan entrance, right next to more empty desert. I'm surprised the border even lets you get this far. I did discover a turtle all the way out here, which was certainly weird to see, as they're meant to live near bodies of water. Every variant of Teyvat turtle does. This area is also eerily empty, though as I progressed, more stuff did start showing up again. I found another turtle habitat, and sure, there's grass and shade, but no easy access to water, so it's just a very strange place for them to be. There were even some hilichurls and treasure hoarders further up, though how exactly they got up here, I haven't a clue. Closer to the top, I managed to get some good views of the inaccessible part of the desert, and also where Nod Krai is likely to be. At the very tip is a consecrated beast. Dropping down led me to the only accessible part of the Samudra coast, and I even went all the way back here just in case there was something there, but no, it's just another liminal space. Over on this tiny island is an abyss mage ritual, and along this stretch there seems to be a hilichurl race going on. The turtle is winning for sure. This is cool because it actually shows the effects of living in a desert. An old hilichurl camp is buried in the sand. The area where you get the Artist Adrift quest has some hillochells along the beach, as well as even more washed up boats. I went as high as I could to get as close to the border, and I certainly don't think Hoyo expected people to explore here because this cliff range has absolutely nothing. But you do get an even better view of the land masses on the horizon, and over here we have a better view of that extra fontaine waterfall. There's even a really small hidden one originating from the desert. The next stop was the fontaine border, which had a sizable hilichurl camp and quite a well-defined road that also heads down into the inaccessible section. This area even has lanterns and platforms, implying people might have lived here at least at one point, and a fontaine tent in Sumeru. Since Fontaine has a lot of water, there was significantly less to explore, but as soon as I was there, I found myself impressed once again by just how much Hoyo have improved with their world design. Maybe this is just me nerding out, but I love seeing all these different items they put in the sand because so much gets washed ashore, like bottles, cargo, branches, different types of shells. The coastline itself is really worn down from so many floods, and a crab race. Continuing on, I found the abandoned hypostasis arena, since the hydro hypostasis fled to Inazuma, and along this edge of the beach are some blubber beasts sunning themselves, more hilichurls, and this interaction between some crabs. This hilichurl over here is meditating. Elenus's skeleton is quite intimidating approaching it from this side. Having arrived in the Court of Fontaine region, I set up the mountain and to the village. Yet if you look at the village from this side, it's quite empty, and looks kind of like they didn't quite finish detailing it. It for sure needs at least another house in this spot. Next up was the Liffey region. Running through this large stretch of empty land, I said hi to father and was hoping I might be able to just walk around the top of that waterfall, but alas, Paimon had other ideas. So instead I carried on past the tower, climbed up as high as I could, and did get a closer view of this side of Mont Essos. And eventually I came to this weird bridge that just stops directly at the mountain. Perhaps the rest of the structure simply got buried underneath, who's to say? But from the top of this cliff, we do get a view of this side and the ocean past the border. You can even see where the ocean starts to get much more shallow. Over at the Institute, I spotted a bird and fox fighting over a piece of fruit and continued my journey. Up higher is that annoying road that just stops, but also a very picturesque camp. If we keep following the path's trajectory, we end up at another annoying Paimon barrier area, where they most definitely did not leave enough room. There's an enemy up here to fight and everything, but the entire time, the screen is just covered in red. The backside of this mountain was similarly empty, but from atop here we also get a great view of this side of the waterfall. It's surprisingly close to the edge. And there's this cute Easter egg. Passing through this big hilichurl camp led me to another picturesque spot that also earns your chest if you line the painting up with the time of day. I actually managed to find a spot to get a good angle of what was behind these cliffs, and in doing so discovered this little hidden area that I had never even known was here. The Loch and Weeping Willow regions didn't have much to see from this side, consisting mostly of empty fields from above. Past the abandoned village is another sort of hidden camp that only has use in one very small quest line after freeing this dog, but it does add to the vibe. And then this final stretch of Fontaine. It perplexed me a bit. Why are there so many crashed and abandoned boats when this area is largely devoid of life? I suppose they're simply remnants of the abandoned village, maybe? Guys, now on to the last leg of our journey. I headed on over to the Chenyu Vale side of the border and started in one of my favourite spots of the region, this cove with loads of tortoises, and a giant one too. This is right on the Paimon border, which actually ends up making it quite eerie too, despite this. If I go over to this little island, we even get a glimpse of other parts of Liyue. Trekking up the mountain nearby reveals even more, so technically speaking, at least for now, Fontaine connects to Liyue's oceans all the way along here. This is also where those two fighting goats can be found, with an audience of squirrels cheering them on. I passed through these small ruins to find Chaoying village. I've always found this lone house at the end of the path rather unsettling, especially when you head around the back of it, because there's just nothing. Then there's this small hole which also feels really out of place because so much detail has been put into it, but then you look around and again, nothing. We needed to cross the stretch connecting Chenyu Vale and Chingsa village next, but not before I show you all these dogs that have been digging up holes. You can even get artifacts from them. Even from this side, you can see just how unpolished and unfinished the Chingsa coastline is in comparison to this. After reaching the village, I immediately started climbing this huge mountain. Well, technically biking. vertically, and we can actually see yet another waterfall connecting the river to Fontaine, as well as the entire back portion of Chenyu Vale. So because the border placement in this part of Liyue is particularly weird, I mean just look at how awkward the entire border looks on the map, we can for some reason access this area above the village that we really shouldn't be able to. From up here we can see, well, one, a random path forming out of midair that leads to this body of water, and two, the connecting land between Liyue and Stormterror's lair. We can get quite close too. While this entire area is devoid of life, I did manage to find a single animal. Moving on for now, we had to head through the Oceanids arena next, and you can see the exact moment we cross into the arena as the weather changes. And in my opinion, considering this is what, a 1.0 boss arena, the area is stunning, probably the most impressive one of the old bosses. Things just get even eerier as we step back into Mondstadt, and subsequently back into a lot of unfinished and empty parts of the map. The difference between old and new regions in this journey has become remarkably clear. Getting closer to Stormterror's lair makes it especially apparent. I mean, you can go from empty fields of grass here to, oh, there's a chest. There is in fact a chest. As I was saying, the cliffs are somewhat difficult to climb, so that is probably what was meant to put players off a bit. That is a huge patch of dirt right there. And look at that, that's right above the waypoint, the entrance to Stormterror's lair. Textures also start becoming really, not textured. And this section is pretty accessible actually. Stormterror's lair, again, comparing to newer ruins and ancient cities, it definitely feels more like it's imitating a ruined city. If you actually take a close look, you'll see a lot of it makes no sense. Down here for instance, giant walls and paved road leading to nothing. Entire stone roads and buildings missing where others aren't, and the layout as a whole is just really weird. Back on top, you can get really close to this body of water, and then there's that one gate with the Fatui standing guard that people have theorized over for years at this point, which is also just weird that there's absolutely nothing on the other side of the wall. And what about that one road from the Dainsleave quest? Where's the rest of it? Because there's no sign of where it went. And why were there ruin guard footprints there? Where did bro go? Around the backside of the lair, all the trees up top become dead. To set the backdrop and the mood of the place, I would imagine. There's only one piece of wall that even comes up this high. But anyway, we've spoken enough about unsettling borders of Stormterror's lair that we haven't even taken a look at the damage Klee has done to the environment. This valley has to be how Mondstadt City is connected to Dorman Port, because, you see, Klee kind of blew this cliff up and now it's blocked off. We can get pretty close to it too, and weirdly, 3 Anemo slimes spawn near it. Even though there's nothing else of note nearby, you can just about see the other side. Did you hear that? I better get out of here before I end up just like this cliff. Going around the mainland borders of Teyvat showed a lot more than I would have discovered on my own. It's cool to see just how much there really is, to find those small details that I might have otherwise missed. There's something particularly calming about looking around those empty spaces too, of which there are surprisingly a lot of in Teyvat. But anyway, thank you for watching, and if you enjoy these way too in-depth videos I make and are interested in supporting the channel at all, be sure to check out memberships. Until next time.